So, good afternoon. My name is Rose Roach, and it has been my honor to serve as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Nurses Association for these past 8 years. As I prepare to retire in the new year, I can't think of a more powerful moment to share with these incredible nurses that are standing here with me today. As you'll hear from the nurses themselves, these new contracts are historic, not only for what's in them, but for what they mean to us, patients. These contracts are also historic because they brought together and kept together 15,000 nurses in the Twin Cities and Twin Ports for the very first time ever in negotiations. From informational pickets to strikes to bargaining demands, these nurses worked in solidarity with one another like I've never seen before in my 34-year career in the labor movement. That's because this fight was so important. For decades, M&A nurses have raised the alarm about the growing corporatization of our healthcare system. Hospitals and units have been closed, prices have gone up for patients, and the CEOs responsible are making millions and taking massive raises every year. This year, after the devastation of the pandemic and the retention crisis that the hospital executives themselves created, nurses knew it was a now or never moment to fight for the health care that all Minnesotans deserve. I am so thankful to these nurses, not just for the opportunity to work for them, but I'm equally grateful as a patient myself. It would have been easy for these nurses to bargain over wages only. That is, after all, what the hospitals wanted to do. But nurses insisted that this was the year that we had to address the public health crisis of understaffing inside our hospitals. The nurses were resolved to fight to ensure patients could receive the safe, quality care that they deserve. They were ready to fight to put a stop to the hospital policies that are pushing our nurses away from the bedside and out of the profession. Patients don't have a collective voice in our hospitals. When we receive a massive medical bill, wait hours in the emergency room, or sit with our call light on, there is little we can do. But nurses and other unionized workers in our hospitals have the power to do more and to be the voice of patients through collective bargaining. They have the power to stand up to the corporate executives who have so much power over our lives, our livelihood, and our health. These nurses are our voice in the hospital systems that have become depersonalized, inhumane corporations. Health is not a consumable good. I don't have a heart attack one day just because there's a discount on bypass surgery at Allina. It's long past time that we recognize healthcare for the human need that it is and stop trying to fit it inside of a market employer-based system that is failing patients as well as the healthcare workforce. We are all indebted to the nurses who stood up and used their collective power to fight for all of us, to protect safe, high-quality care for all Minnesotans. After 9 grueling months of negotiations, it would be easy for these nurses to step back and say, our work is done. But that's not who these incredible nurses are. They are continuing the fight for you and for me and for all of us to put patients before profits in our hospitals. Thank you, and now it is my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce my friend and M&A's fearless leader, President Mary Chernow.
Thank you, Rose. Today, I am pleased to share that our nurses at 15 hospitals have voted overwhelmingly to ratify historic new 3-year contracts for 15,000 nurses. All through this process, nurses have been clear that our #1 priority was addressing staffing to keep nurses at the bedside and protect patient care. But for 9 months, our executives sat across the table from us and insisted there was no way they would negotiate with us on staffing. No way the nurses were going to run the hospitals. But we knew that this was a make or break issue for our nurses, for our patients, and for our hospitals. So we stuck it out. We took to the sidewalk for 3 weeks for a 3-day strike in September to show we were serious. But that wasn't good enough. Our executives didn't move. So we were ready to do it again. We were ready to go out in December here for a 3-week strike over the holidays. Finally, they heard us. At many of our bargaining tables, it wasn't until that second strike vote that they started to seriously discuss staffing. And because of that, because of our tenacity, we won unprecedented language to address staffing levels. So thanks to the changes nurses insisted on, our staffing levels will never get worse than they are today. And nurses have new protections and opportunities to advocate for safer staffing when our units are short-staffed. However, our work is not done. As other speakers will address, this status quo in our healthcare system is unsustainable. We continue to fight for staffing levels and to oppose the corporatization of our healthcare. But for nurses who have felt unheard and abandoned for years, this new contract is a lifeline. It is a ray of hope. This contract, because of the 9 months nurses put into fight and win, will help to retain nurses in our hospitals, where the fight continues to put patients before profits. Thank you.
And next we will hear from Victoria Z. Handler, a nurse from Methodist.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Z. Handler, and I am an RN in the post-anesthesia care unit at Health Partners Park Nicollet Methodist Hospital. For months, we have been hoping for this day. The day where we could say, we have a contract. We had to fight for 9 months to get our executives to take these problems seriously and to agree to these compromises. It was a hard fight, but we stayed organized, and we did it. This is a win, not only for nurses, but also for our patients, for everyone in Minnesota. We now have contract language that will help to bring nurses back to the bedside and help retain nurses who are already employed there. For decades, nurses at Methodist have only had vacation and sick time to use for extended illnesses and injuries. But starting in 2024, we will have short-term disability benefits available to us. Yes, that's right. We've never had short-term disability, which is a very common thing for other employees in other areas of the work field. But we are also now able to review our staffing guidelines more than once a year, which gives nurses a stronger voice in our patients' care and their safety. Other items now in our contract include the hospital agreeing to give us 6 designated resource nurses to help out on our floors when our staffing is short. We also are being allowed to have per diem nurses to pick up shifts from other nurses that are denied vacation. Nurses seeking doctoral nursing degrees will be eligible for tuition reimbursement. And nurses will now get recognition for prior experience that is not within a hospital setting. All of these things are designed for both retention and recruitment. On top of that, all these accomplishments will continue to strengthen and support the nurses within the walls of Methodist. These new contracts will help to put patients above profits in our hospitals, but our work is not done. It certainly isn't. We will stay organized, and we will continue our fight for high-quality patient care that protects not only the nurses at the bedside, but also our patients, so we can protect those in our community that are our patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Next, we'll hear from Tricia Reshkis. She is a children's Minneapolis nurse.
Hi, again, my name is Tricia Rishkis. I'm a night nurse at Children's in Minneapolis. What the past 9 months has taught me and all of us is that when we organize and we have solidarity, we win. When our collective bargaining process is honored, we win, unlike what happened to the railroad workers when both parties sided with the bosses. We've fought for and won language to ensure nurses have a say in our working conditions and our labor. We do the work. We, the bedside nurses, have a say in how we staff our units now. Language to support nurses who stop the line and advocate for patients and safe staffing, to be free from discipline or bullying when we use our nursing judgment to advocate for safe staffing. We now have language to ensure equitable hiring practices, to fight systemic racism and health inequities. Also, we have language to protect nurses against workplace violence. We have won a contract that we can be proud of, that will recruit and retain nurses, that also hopefully will ensure quality care going forward. This is not something that's going to be a quick fix, but something that we have good tools now to fight for and advocate for our patients. We will continue to organize. We will continue to push for the best care for our patients and for all workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia. Kelly Anas is a nurse over at Abbott Northwestern, part of the Alina system. Kelly?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Kelly Anas. I'm an ICU nurse and union chair at Abbott Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis. I'm here today thrilled to announce that Abbott Northwestern, Mercy, Unity, and United Hospitals have all voted to ratify our union contracts with Alina Health. The deal reached in the early hours last Tuesday morning is a step in the right direction to address the concerns of bedside nurses at these facilities when it comes to how we are staffed to take care of Minnesotans. The conditions inside Minnesota hospitals the last few years have evolved into something the likes of which I have not seen in my 14-year career. I represent many nurses with decades more experience than I have who would echo these comments. Long wait times, patients being seen and treated in emergency department waiting rooms, full hospital units with 1 or 2 nurses scheduled to work, nurses new to the profession training, and more brand new nurses. Hospital units where the highest experience level of a nurse on shift is 6 months. 6 months. Minnesota, everyone should care about this. These are our working conditions, yes, but they are the places you go to for help, to heal, to give birth, to die with dignity. We never know when our role in life will suddenly pivot from parent, sibling, employee, friend to hospital patient. When that time comes, each and every person deserves to be met with a nurse who has been properly trained, has the appropriate knowledge and resources to care for you, and has the time to do more for you than just tasks followed by an "I'll be right back." We know the pandemic has played a role in this increasingly fractured system. However, it cannot continue to be the scapegoat for corporate greed and a failure in leadership to listen to their front lines. It is my fervent hope that these contracts represent the beginning and not the end of the listening. Certainly, in some aspects, we had hoped for more, but that is the nature of negotiations. There are feelings of relief that we aren't picketing in the varying precipitation happening this week. And there are feelings that our contract wins will make hospital nursing a desirable place to work and stay. Overwhelmingly, the feelings of the nurses are that of resolve to continue to push for better patient care conditions inside hospitals, whether that is with our employers or through legislative action. Even as tentative agreements were reached at each bargaining unit last week, over 100 nurses attended a town hall with Minnesota legislative leaders to continue to share our stories and make our push for the Keeping Nurses at the Bedside Act. Now we rest, for there is resistance in that too. Then we will get up and continue our advocacy for what we know healthcare for Minnesotans can be, what it should be. Until nurses see these healthcare systems consistently prioritize care of the human being, not the bottom line, patients before profits will continue to be our battle cry. Thank you for your time today and your ongoing attention to this important contract campaign.
Thank you, Kelly. She'll come in. Okay. So I said earlier that the solidarity was key to this campaign, and that included working not only with the Twin Cities, but also with the Twin Ports. We will now hear from Andrea Rubish, who is a nurse at St. Luke's.
Hi, my name is Andrea Rubish, and I am first and foremost an oncology hospice nurse at St. Luke's in Duluth, and I've been on our negotiating team. Last night, our nurses overwhelmingly voted to ratify the contract that we worked to negotiate for over the last 8 months. When all of this started, our nurses asked us to make gains in staffing language that would help protect them as they worked at the bedside. They also asked us for stronger language around the issues that recruit and retain nurses, like floating, vacation scheduling, and straight shifts. And our nurses showed up. They signed petitions, marched on bosses, picketed, went out on strike, and voted to strike again in order to obtain that language. They worked hard to make their voices heard, and they didn't just do it for themselves. They did it for the community of patients that we take care of day after day. They want to make it better and safer for them too. We also will be standing in solidarity with our fellow nurses at Lakeview Hospital and Two Harbors. Although they have withdrawn their notice to strike, they remain committed to the same goals we all share and will continue to negotiate in good faith. We hope that a tentative agreement will be reached for them too, and will show up to support them whenever needed. So now the work starts over again. The work to implement this new language and make sure what we worked so hard for to obtain gets followed. We know change doesn't happen overnight, and we are ready to work to make those changes happen in the weeks ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea and Oscar. We want to get that on the record. Next, we will hear from a nurse leader and an RN at M Health Fairview Southdale, Erica Helling.
My name is Erica Helling. I'm a registered nurse at M Health Fairview Southdale, and I'm proud to say that we ratified a stronger contract. In 2001, Fairview nurses were on strike for 23 days to earn quality language to protect staffing. The big win from that strike gave nurses the right to close a nursing unit for 2 hours, to slow the pace, to get more help, for staff to catch up, and to continue to provide excellent care. Staffing concerns and contract negotiations have always been at the forefront of every conversation with our employers. The nurses at M Health Fairview gained improvements in how we negotiate our staffing grids, or how we determine how many people each nurse cares for in a day. We also devised a system to identify when a nurse determines that a patient assignment is unsafe, and the employer acknowledges that truth. These significant steps that help nurses to protect patients, to work towards solutions, and use the collaborative insights of bedside personnel to provide best practice. We're proud of our agreement and hope to work within this contract for many years to come. Deeply concerning for me and M Health nurses is the threat of a merger with Sanford Health. As a 25-year employee of Fairview, the only hospital I've ever worked with, I am alarmed that a Minnesota institution can be bought and sold to an out-of-state entity. This proposed merger is very personal to me. It's my employer. It's where my children were born. My family's medical needs are met here, and even cochlear implant surgeries for my child at the prestigious University of Minnesota. Minnesota is known for its superior health care. Healthcare put Minnesota on the map. People travel from around the world to receive care here, the care that every Minnesotan has come to expect. Nursing care elevates the patient's experience and provides vast improvements in outcomes for those patients served in our state. Our nursing practice thrives in the state of Minnesota because of our nursing union. The Minnesota Nurses Association drives the standard of excellence throughout our state, ensuring that patients are cared for safely. Worrisome for me as a union nurse, what happens when an employer buys our system? Is our contract recognized? Do we need to fight all over again to keep the high standards and protections our contract provides to the practice of nursing? As we settled our contract with mHealth Fairview, the negotiating team attempted to bargain specific language that would provide some level of protection for our fiercely fought-for contract. mHealth Fairview refused to sign off on our preferred language, instead only agreeing to language that essentially states that Sanford must acknowledge our union. This is not protection. It likely would mean that we would have to renegotiate our entire contract. In recent years, mHealth Fairview has made significant changes to the landscape of healthcare here in the Twin Cities, buying Health East and then closing 2 hospitals within that system. The 2 hospitals had significance in our communities. Bethesda was one of 2 long-term care hospitals where patients with prolonged critical illness could go to recover. St. Joe's was a critical hospital in downtown St. Paul that served many underprivileged and mental health patients. Both shuttered hospitals were not money makers, but essential for our community's health. These examples of profit-driven decisions should alarm Minnesotans. A merger with Sanford Health and mHealth Fairview will not offer more for Minnesotans. Who's next on the closure list? What assurances do we have as Minnesotans that our quality care will remain? We all need to be aware and fight back against this next step in the landscape changes in healthcare in Minnesota.
Thank you, Erica. Now I want to bring up M&A's first Vice President, Chris Rubish, who is also a nurse at Essentia Duluth.
Thank you so much. My name is Chris Rubish. I'm a cardiac nurse, and I'm very proud to serve as M&A's first Vice President, and I was a negotiating team member representing my colleagues at Essentia Twin Ports. I'm here to share with you that earlier this week, my coworkers and I overwhelmingly ratified our contract agreement. We're very proud that this agreement adds new language, giving us a say in the creation and review of staffing grids, adds additional liability protection for nurses who are working in conditions that can be judged to be unsafe in the nurse's clinical judgment, and it adds significant benefits that will help retain senior nurses who are going to be absolutely vital as we train the next generation of caregivers in Minnesota. We are so proud of every one of our members who showed up, who walked picket lines, who raised their voices and stood up for our profession and for our patients. And we want to deeply, deeply thank all the workers across Minnesota who stood with us and understood the importance of this fight. And I know that my coworkers and I are standing with our colleagues at Essentia Health Brainerd and Essentia Health Virginia and other sites as they begin to address these same concerns in their contract negotiations that are upcoming. My coworkers and I know that this isn't the end, that this contract language is a significant win, but it's also just the start, and that we plan to continue this fight as we go to the Capitol, and we work to pass the Keeping Nurses at the Bedside Act into law and add significant enforcement mechanisms to the staffing language that we gained. And we are ready for that fight because nurses are mobilized and engaged, and we understand the power that we now have as 15,000 collective nurses. So thank you so much.
All right, and we will now open it up for questions.
If I may ask, you all through this process have described staffing issues now that are bad now. Seems like a lot of the contract language you've gotten will prevent it from getting worse. You can't reduce the staffing anymore. You can step in if there's a 50% increase in falls and things like that. But you said things are needed now. And you've discussed it a little bit. Maybe discuss more what's in it that's going to help staffing issues now as compared to when things just get worse later.
I'm going to let a nurse answer that question.
Thank you for asking that. I know that one thing that we got at North Memorial, let me go back. The first year of the pandemic at North Memorial, we were able to get in front of our nursing leaders, and we were in front of them like twice a week. This is huge, being able to get to your top leaders to discuss issues on your floor, because as a rule, they don't come down to our floors and see what's going on. So we got a letter of understanding that at any time, any floor that's having an issue can call for a meeting, bring along nurses from that floor to meet with our nursing leadership. Not a mutual agreement on a meeting, but either party. Now, the reason I bring this up is because all along I've been saying it's a control issue. They don't want to relinquish any control. So I don't know, our nurses will start to realize what this means, being able to call for a meeting when they're having problems on the floor. This is huge because we can rally around that, bring the nurses to the nursing leaders, and lay out our plea for what we need. This is huge. It worked really well during the first, we didn't have as many PB as we needed, but we at least had the ear of our leaders to help address our issues on a weekly basis. And so I know that we use that argument at the table to push for this letter of understanding that we have now. And I don't know if other people have things like that you have in place, but thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I'll just add, at several bargaining units, including my own, we gained additional liability protection for nurses who are being asked to increasingly push the boundaries of what they feel is safe and prudent. And although that's not a quick fix, we believe that that's something that will help keep nurses at the bedside while we train and recruit the nurses that are needed to become the long-term fix. Ultimately, we need to stop the bleeding. And we believe that this is exactly the kind of thing that will give nurses the protections to stay at the bedside while we bring in the additional staff that we need.
So Mary, I have a question. Like, everybody that spoke today, does everybody have a little different thing that they're bringing to their particular healthcare organization? So not, it's not like not a uniform, okay, everybody gets this, all matching. It's each to each place.
Each negotiating team kind of looking at their contracts. Some of our contracts are more developed than others, and so they look to see what help. You're absolutely right. They're all a little bit different, but they all focus on getting something that will help with our staffing, help with our workplace violence, all the other issues. So you're absolutely right. They're not all the same. We're not all one contract.
And then, talking about staffing, forgive me, did you ask for more staffing? Did you say, hey, we need to get a new bar here, and instead of 2 nurses for 10 patients, we want 4 nurses for 10 patients?
Right, that would be like addressing our individual staffing grids. That wouldn't have been something that we would necessarily that detail at the negotiating table, but what we do is set up the conversations that can be now taken care of in our committees.
Okay, somebody else can ask, 'cause
Yeah.
I have one. Is there, these are words on paper, actions speak louder than words. Is there certain benchmarks that management has to hit in a time period so that you know that, hey, this is really gonna happen? Or is there accountability that you guys hold to management that, hey, you haven't met these deadlines, or?
that was my question. So.
Yeah, that would be kind. First of all, as far as benchmarks, and everyone, other people have timelines. So, like one of our issues was the day-night rotating. The nurses rotating so much that they can't tolerate it. They can't follow those schedules. So we have a deadline that our administration needs to, by a certain time, have everyone's schedule so that they're rotating less. Right now we're 50-50. We want to make it down to like 60-40. So that's one example of adjusting nurses' schedules, because work-life balance is a huge issue as to why nurses leave the bedside.
And is that like they might work a night shift and then a day shift and not have too much time to turn around, and then you're all
Yeah, I saw that at the bargaining table where I would work the whole weekend night shift and then have to come back and bargain on Tuesday morning. And every time I complained about it, and I said, I know what you're talking about now, nurses. This is horrible to have to try to think after one dubious night of sleep and be there back at 7 a.m. So that's what I mean by the flipping back and forth. And the work-life balance, a lot of ours, hospitals have pushed for straight shifts,
What about this notion of every hospital being different? If you had to take a 30,000-foot view, Mary, and say, how many different contracts, how many different, like 7 or 8?
15 hospitals.
15.
Yeah.
Is there an overriding message that you say is the win? And,
Okay, so one thing all of us did was to have quality indicators that will, when these quality indicators, which are the same indicators that they have to keep track of, you know, like falls and bed sores and workplace injuries, et cetera. All of these quality indicators, we incorporated that into our language. When these quality indicators get worse, that would bring about staffing reevaluations and evaluations of the grids. And so that was the path that we took. Part of it is that it should be no problem for them to keep track of this because they have to keep track of it for Medicare, Medicaid, and you would think that they want these indicators to be as positive as possible.
And was that a huge fight to get to this point?
Yes, it was. They didn't even want, they consistently, even though we said from the beginning, wanted to do wages only. And I'm sorry, but they didn't really take anything else that we said seriously until we did our second strike vote. Some of the hospitals would half-heartedly, my hospital, I give a little bit, but not that hardcore looking at our staffing language until we took our most recent strike vote.
Mary, I know it's a minor difference, but why 18% pay raises in the Twin Cities and 17 in Duluth? And then also, is it essentially 6% a year for these pay raises, or is it escalate?
It's for here in the metro, it's 7, 6, and 5. So 7% retro back to June 1st, and then 6% starting. Oh, now I got to do dates. Our second year, and then 5% our third year.
Okay, so it's kind of front loaded the way
Yep.
bigger increases first.
Yep.
And why the 1% difference between?
Chris, I'm going to have Chris from Duluth answer that.
Sure. So I can, in our pay raises at both Essentia, Twin Ports, and St. Luke's are 7%, 6%, 4%. And that 1% difference really just reflects a slightly different economic market, which we understand. But again, as we've all been saying for the last 9 months, and will continue to say, the focus of this was on staffing language and really the economics are certainly an important piece to keeping and retaining nurses, but the staffing language is really what our nurses wanted to see, and that's what our nurses were fighting for through this whole process.
And one thing I want to point out about the staffing and the staffing committees, and that I would learn from being a vice president of our National Nurses United, where they push for ratios. We need long-term legislation in regards to the staffing problem, because we can all go back to our committees and we can rally our nurses and all that, but that's only going to go so far. And on top of it, if we can get staffing legislation, then it won't matter whether you're a union hospital or a non-union hospital, because as a nurse leader, I can't sit and say that I don't care about the hospitals that haven't been able to be unionized. I can't say that I don't care about the patients that happen to go to a hospital that's not unionized. This is a big reason why we need both national and statewide legislation in regards to these issues, so that every patient everywhere can get the quality care that they deserve.
Mary, I mean, those policies only work if the nurses are there to fill the shifts, and I discussed this before, but you're down thousands of nurses across the state right now in hospital environments. So is this going to do any good to address the staffing issues, and do you think there's something in there that's going to bring more nurses in over time?
Well, that's where, I think we all tried to address, if we can keep pounding at them to let loose of the control, to be able to see that something so simple as letting nurses work straight shifts. Our contracts, our contracts steer towards straight shifts. I can't tell you how hard it is to rotate, even day evening, and how that drives people away from the bedside. And we've got to, I know we have a lot of long-term nurses here where we waited 20 years before we got Christmas off. Well, that's not going to fly with the younger generation. They start going after the second Christmas going, hey, I worked the last 2 Christmases and I want the third Christmas off. And I am not going to say that they don't deserve it. We need to find new ways to keep our young nurses at the bedside because they're not going to put up with the conditions that maybe my generation did. Okay? We've got to move with the times in our contracts, and that's what we're trying to do. Because you're not going to have a nurse anymore like my sister-in-law who just retired and she was a 45-year orthopedic nurse the whole time. You're not going to see that anymore. So.
Can I add one thing to this?
Yep.
Because we've heard this throughout the campaign, and I just want to point out that the State Board of Nursing, who governs nursing practice and grants nursing license in the state, will tell you that we have more licensed nurses in the state of Minnesota right now than at any point in the last 5 years. We also have fewer nurses who are using that license to provide care at the bedside than at any point in the last 5 years. And I think for the last 9 months, we have all been telling you why that is. That's because nurses aren't being protected from workplace violence. Nurses aren't getting the work-life balance that they want. Nurses aren't getting the straight shifts that allow them to be with their families. And nurses just aren't putting up with that, and they're walking away. And so we feel that the language that we got in the contracts that we've all ratified this week, those are the starting of steps to bring those nurses back to the bedside. The nurses exist in Minnesota, and we want them to come back and provide care.
And once again, just so that you give the credit to us that we are due, remember, all along they wanted to just do wages only. So the fact that for 9 months we have hopefully educated, and you, all of you, I thank you for helping us to educate the community on what the conditions are like in our hospitals and what needs to be done. So I do thank all of the media for all of your contribution towards that cause. I can't thank you enough.
Mary, if I could ask, after the first strike, there was somewhat of a pause in activity that seemed kind of timed with the election. There was the Wells Fargo protest and things like that. But you returned to the strike vote and things like that shortly after the election. And I'm wondering if that was intentional, and I'm wondering if as a result you might find some favor with the legislature when you return.
We hope so. We hope so. We hope that we have enough nurse-friendly legislators on Capitol Hill now. As far as I'm concerned, I know when I'm taking care of people in my ICU, I don't really ask them what political party they are. And so I think that it doesn't matter what political party you are, you should be backing what the nurses are asking. Because like somebody, I think Kelly said, someday any one of you will be a patient. But yeah, we are hoping that we have high hopes with the trifecta. Yeah.
I would just add, in relation to the pause, as you called it, the nurses took an extraordinary step in September to withhold their labor in order to fight for safe patient care in the hospitals. When that strike ended, the idea was to go back to the table, right, and start to negotiate over those issues, to get serious about what was going on in the hospitals, what needed to be fixed, how we could come together as labor and management to recognize the problem, the situation, and together come up with some solutions. The hospitals, unfortunately, didn't go down that path. They continued to stay reticent and dug in that, nope, not interested in talking about this most important issue, not only, again, to nurses, but to all of us as well in the community. So that is when we had to start to pivot again. We gave them lots of time. We gave them some time, some chances. Any number of negotiations were taking place for hours and hours on end during that time. And we unfortunately got to a place where the nurses felt, I guess we are going to have to exercise that collective bargaining right again and withhold our labor. We hope we don't, but we're going to see how the nurses feel about that. And as you know, the nurses overwhelmingly voted to do such a thing effective December 11th, and that was the trigger that, thank goodness, got everybody to the table and got serious about tackling these issues.
Any last question?
You mentioned the Sanford merger. I'm curious, since Attorney General Ellison has mentioned he wants to hear feedback on this deal. Have you talked with his office or planning to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We have talked with the Attorney General, and we are talking to the governor. We are talking to the legislators. We're talking to anybody and everybody. Merger mania inside of healthcare is bad medicine. It is not good for patients. It is not good for the workforce. Studies have been shown to raise prices of healthcare when mergers happen. You know how they always like to say, oh, competition, competition. Prices will go down. Doesn't happen. Prices have historically gone up every time these big mergers happen. And as Erica mentioned earlier, they create healthcare deserts. That is the last thing we need, is to decrease access to healthcare in this state or in this country. We already have that going on just by the sake of the way the system is structured to begin with people not being able to afford to do even the simplest type of healthcare, to go to a doctor to get checked out because of co-payments and co-insurance and co-deductibles and everything else that's going on that causes those barriers to care. So nurses will continue to fight with every fiber of our being against having a South Dakota company come in here and take over as the largest healthcare provider in the state of Minnesota. Not acceptable. It will not improve patient care. It will not improve quality, and we will see prices skyrocket, and in addition to, we will likely see closures. We're not going to stand for that.
Do you know what the timeline on that merger is? Or?
We don't actually. We don't know the definitive timeline on that merger, but we're going at, I mean, we pivoted, right? We left the bargaining table 1 week ago yesterday, and we are diving right into everything we need to do to try to make sure the community knows. And we are already hearing from community members that they don't want this to happen. They don't want this to happen. They want their community clinics, their community hospital, even though those are corporate to some level, they would prefer to stay with that than to have yet another big major corporation come in here and take over.
I interviewed a nurse outside of United back in September when they were picketing, and she had told me that something she wanted to fight for was paid family leave.
Mm-hmm.
Was that addressed at all in this contract? I know it's an individual.
Yeah, oh, yeah, you bet it was. I believe that children's, children's got 2 weeks, right? You guys got 2 weeks. But the rest of us were given letters of understanding that if it ever went through the legislature and they got it there, which I believe it's one of their top priorities, that then we would get it. And I know at our table, if that did happen, we did retain the right to come back and bring it back to bargain over it, to open up the contract, to bargain that issue so that we could bargain the particulars of it, rather than letting them describe how it is. So that's kind of what the rest of us, unless you all ended up with something else.
Yeah, I can speak.
All right, so they all, did you get it and we didn't? No.
So I work at Abbott Northwestern, which is the same employer as the nurse from United. We have the opportunity, to purchase a short-term disability insurance option. Conversations around paid family leave happened up till the very end, to the point that we were asking for 2 paid weeks when Allina Health offers all of their non-contract employees currently 8 weeks starting on the first of the year. They increased it from 6, and they announced that during our negotiations that they were going to increase it. And we're obstinate in not wanting to offer that same benefit to the nurses. So we took the option for nurses to opt in during open enrollment in 2023 for the 2024 year to do short-term disability instead, which is good, not great, and better than we have right now. So we're excited. We can have, after 10 calendar days, up to 80 days paid at 60% of our regular wages, so not including overtime. And purchased by the nurse, not covered by the employer at all. Yeah.
Hardly paid family.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything further? Yeah, Chris, tell your story.
Well, I guess I'll just add that, that's a priority for many of our nurses, and that speaks, I think, exactly to what I was saying earlier about why our nurses leaving the bedside. What inducements can we give to bring those nurses back to the bedside to provide the care that they're trained to do, that they're licensed to do, and that I think Minnesotans need them to do. And although many of our contracts didn't get that, I would say that our nurses, we have 15,000 nurses who are engaged and mobilized and ready to keep fighting. Now the fight goes to the legislature, and we know that that's going to be a priority in the new session. And rather than looking at that as something that we didn't get, we have an opportunity to have 15,000 nurses join the coalition that brings that benefit to every worker in Minnesota. How much better of a win is that? Rather than keeping it just for nurses, that we have the opportunity to bring that to every worker in Minnesota. And nurses are ready to join that coalition and make that happen.
There's a reason I have him as my first vice president. Well said, well said. Any other questions?
Great, thanks everyone.
All right.